Hey yo, why is bro so beefy, man? Hey, what's going on guys, Ace here, and today we are going to dissect the newest member of the new Gen 11s, the French center midfielder Hugo. Now, immediately I gotta say, I have not been this impressed by someone's debut ever since we got Snuffy back in the Uber's game. Not only did Hugo deliver one of, if not the best passes we've seen in the entirety of the show, but he also completely destroyed Isagi's weapons. Not just his double gun volley, not just his spinning volley, but even his ability to play with his teammates, which as you all know is one of Isagi's best weapons. And so, as I said, I immediately approve of this guy. This motherfucker right here is so deserving of his position as the center midfielder of the new Gen 11 formation. And in all honesty, everything about him works, from his design, his personality, his mentality, and even his playing style. I mean, for someone who is as analytical as Isagi and Karasu, why is bro mad beefy? In all honesty, it feels like Kunigami mixed with Karasu or Isagi. However, before we actually get to his playing style and personality, let's actually start with something much simpler. Let's start with his design, because I feel like Mr. Nomura really pulled it off with him. Not only does he have the two-tone hair, which is always great, but his sideway lashes are just the icing on the cake. And here's the thing, in his first panel, when Loki actually questioned him about Isagi, we did not get to see these lashes because his bangs were covering them. And I really feel like this was such a beautiful twist, because we have Rin and Sai with the bottom eyelashes, and we have Hiyori with the upper eyelashes. And now we have someone with absurdly side lashes. And not to look into it that much, but this could indicate that he has an ocular ability. I mean, while setting up his pass in chapter 330, he definitely seemed to have an insane ocular ability that enabled him to snipe that pass, because the writer actually focused on his eye the same way he did with Sai back in the U20 game and the same way he did with Charles in the PXG game. Now this could mean that much like Charles, he might present the sniper eyes. However, it's just speculation at this point. But I feel like this speculative point is the perfect segue for us to talk about his playing style. And while Mr. Nomura really pulled it off with his design, I feel like Mr. Kanshiro also did an amazing job with this man's playing style. And I know it's only been 2 chapters, but I already deducted how he plays. First, and before we talk about his passing, let's talk about his physique, because back in chapter 330, he honestly just seemed to be tall. However, bro is mad beefy for some reason. He seems like Kunigami, but he has an insane brain, and this is specifically why I am immediately in love with his playing style, making him the second player that immediately impressed me after playing for only 2 chapters. As I said at the beginning of the video, Snuffy was the only player who managed that, which by the way, as you will see from this video, Hugo resembles Snuffy so much, and he actually resembles him in results, not in playing style. I feel like Snuffy and Hugo are reaching the same results with different playing styles. The first difference is of course in their physicality. While Snuffy is tall, he is not strong by any means, and to compensate for that, he learned Jiu-Jitsu so he can dominate the likes of Noah or Prince. However, with Hugo, he seems to have Kunigami's physique, but with an insane brain. However, why I am focusing a lot on his physique? Well, to be frank with you guys, I've been waiting for a character like this. I've been waiting for a character who is as smart as Karasu, as adaptable as Isagi, but at the same time as strong as Baro or Kunigami. And Hugo fits that description perfectly. The guy actually destroyed Rin with just one push. He actually pushed him to the edge of the universe and delivered his pass in the utmost ease, which this is Rin we're talking about. I mean, he is not in the berserker state, but still he is a specimen that you can't shove that easily. Not only that, his step away from Isagi was rather impressive. The guy left Isagi in the dust with just one jump, and then when Rin came to press him, which by the way was perfect, as I said, he dealt with him like a child. And not to sound like a broken record guys, but I've been waiting for a character like this. I've been waiting for a character who is as dominant in the physical aspect as he is in the analytical aspect. In fact, from this feat, and then him swallowing Isagi completely, I feel like Hugo might be one of the best duelists we've seen. He definitely seems to be on Lorenzo's level, albeit he does it completely differently. And I gotta say, this is also something I've been waiting for, because as you all know, I regarded Lorenzo as the best duelist duelist in the U20 category. I mean, sure, we had Rin, but Kaiser was able to do something against Rin while he was completely helpless against Lorenzo. And so not only was that pass an indicator that a matchup between Hugo and Sai will be legendary, but also after chapter 331 and his ability to do like that, I feel like a matchup between Hugo and Lorenzo will also feed generations. And so, as you can see, the hype is through the roof for this guy. I mean, Kaiser who? Bunny who? We've got Hugo, man. And I know, Bunny seems to be an insane player as well, but until we witness him play, I am jumping on Hugo's train. And by the way, another thing that is interesting with Hugo's physicality. If you remember, Kunigami failed as a striker. Instead, he was brought back as a center midfielder. And there he actually pulled his best performance. Not only by keeping Shido on a short leash, but also by being the anchor for both Isagi and Kaiser. And I feel like Hugo is definitely the same as Kunigami in this regard. Definitely to a much higher level. I'm not comparing the two, but I'm just saying that their physicality is perfect for this position. They can hold the ball better than anyone, and they can duel and move the team with them. Again, I want to bring Lorenzo into this. Lorenzo is one of the best playmakers in the show without actually having an insane passing ability. And the reason for that is his dueling weapon. Because the ability to hold the ball and give a breather to your teammates is just so indispensable for a center midfielder. And I feel like Hugo will be the best anchor in the entirety of the U20 category. And in all honesty, it's just amazing to witness. But what is more amazing is actually Hugo being this beefy, but at the same time being this analytical. You see, I've always said in my videos that Karasu will forever be a better center midfielder than Kunigami. Sure, Kunigami is a better anchor, but Karasu's analytical brain is just way ahead of what Kunigami is capable to do. But what if we had Kunigami with Karasu's brains? Well, enter Hugo. And I mean, we can't tell yet, but I feel like Hugo might be even smarter than Karasu. And before, the only player I had smarter than Karasu is Snuffy, because I feel like Karasu is as smart as Isagi and Kaiser, but Isagi has an edge with his adaptability. However, in terms of analysis, Karasu and Aiku were always the best in the U20 category. And now we get to witness a player who might be even better than both. In fact, who am I even kidding? We've seen Karasu struggle with Isagi in the PXG game. Sure, he stopped him multiple times, especially after acquiring Metavision, but you can tell that Isagi had an edge. However, with Hugo, it went completely different. Hugo swallowed Isagi entirely, not just once, but actually twice. And so I am leaning towards Hugo being the smartest player in the U20 category, and second only to Snuffy in the entirety of Blue Lock. And honestly, just imagine how crazy Hugo will be like this. Not only is he one of the strongest players, he is also one of, if not the smartest player. Meaning, what would it even take in order to defeat a guy like this? Because being as smart and as adaptable as Isagi is failing against him, and also specimen like Ren are failing in dueling him. And so, how do you stop a player like this, who casually pushed the best two players in Japan and delivered one of the best passes we've seen in the show? And again, when we get back to that pass, the spiral effect that Mr. Nomura gave it almost seemed like Sai's pass that he delivered to Shido. Although, I gotta say that Sai was much closer to Shido than how Hugo is for Loki. I mean, don't look at the panel because the angle is all messed up, but Hugo delivered the powerful pass between two Metavision users, Ryo and Hiyori, from the center of the field right to the penalty box. And that's definitely one of the most impressive passes we've seen in the show. It's almost comparable to Sai's pass that resulted in the Big Bang Drive. However, as I said, the more impressive thing about it in my eyes is actually it going between two Metavision users, which honestly is just broken. I mean, they could have at least anticipated the open route, kinda like Hiyori and Kaiser did with Charles in the PXG game. Kaiser, just with Metavision, was able to lock down 99% of the routes. And then Hiyori also used his Metavision to completely seal off Charles. And I feel like with both Ryo and Hiyori in the midfield, they would have definitely blocked a lot of Hugo's options. Yet he was able to squeeze the ball through, which is scary, man, because this could mean that he has a passing ability on Charles and Sai's level. I mean, I don't want to jump the gun yet, but in all honesty, he is far more impressive than Kaiser, far more impressive than Lorenzo. As I said, we still don't know the full potential of Bunny and Sai, but the other new Gen 11s were not as impressive as Hugo in their first showing. In fact, let's actually compare them. Kaiser was amazing with his footwork, and his Kaiser impact was insane. However, Hugo's pass is on that level. He delivered an equally impressive pass. And then not only did he destroy Rin and Isagi in a duel, he also completely outsmarted and swallowed Isagi entirely. This is the same Isagi that was able to trick Lorenzo here and there, and this is the same Isagi that was giving Kaiser his biggest challenge next to Ren. And then sure, Lorenzo was impressive by his dribbling and then locking down Kaiser, but the fact that Isagi was able to stop his first pass to Baro really hurt his first showing compared to someone like Hugo, who, as I just said, destroyed everyone and France already scored thanks to him and Charles. And in fact, there is another reason why I like him so much, and it is something that I alluded to before. You see, Karasu is my third favorite character, right below Baro and Noah. And so a player who seems to be like Karasu in terms of analysis, but he also seems to be like Karasu and Lorenzo in terms of assassinating players. However, another reason why I like him is because he seems to have Karasu's mentality. You know I'm talking about, Karasu's way of insulting you by stating factual things. And it seems from his interaction with Isagi, Hugo is the same as that. In fact, speaking of that interaction, let's actually get to the second part of the video, which is how Hugo will completely destroy Japan in this game and why he will be the reason why Isagi and Blue Lock will change forever. Now, hear me out. As I said earlier, we've never seen a player like this, who is so dominant physically, yet at the same time has the best mentality and so smart on the pitch. The guy is so beefy and is so good at dueling that this alone would have made him an insane player. But slap on top of that amazing brain that was able to counter Isagi after witnessing his plays just once, and you will get the making of the player that will cause Japan the most problems in their face-off against France. And I know, France has Loki and Charles, but hear me out. I feel like Loki will be the final boss in the finals, and Hugo will be the boss of this matchup. Hugo will be the reason why Japan will lose miserably, and then the entirety of the U20 World Cups would be about Japan ascending to Hugo and Bunny's level, and then in the finals, Loki will be the biggest problem they are facing. I feel like that's the perfect way to ride the double game against France. Here, they lose miserably because of Hugo, and then they ascend to his level, and by the time they face him again in the finals, they do not lose miserably to him, but rather it will be hard because Loki is there, and inevitably at the end of the game they overcome Loki in order to win the whole World Cups. Or hell, even if they lose to Loki, I feel like it's a W regardless. And I gotta focus on something here. I feel like it's not going to be just Isagi. I feel like Isagi, Ren, Karasu, Aiko, and Ryo all need to ascend to this level. They all need to be on the same tier as Hugo and Bunny. Maybe not all five, but at least we need both Ren and Isagi in order for them to face off against Hugo, Charles, and Loki. However, how would that even look? How would Isagi even compete against someone like Hugo? As I said, in terms of analysis, as far as we've seen, he is better than Isagi. However, I feel like with his adaptability, Isagi will reach this level no problem. But there is another issue. Even if he reaches his level, there is no way he can beat him, because in terms of dueling, Isagi would not have any chance against him. And this is not the case with Lorenzo. Lorenzo was always on Kaiser, and so Isagi was able to sneak up on him. However, with Hugo, it's the other way around. Hugo is not on Ren, he is on Isagi himself, and so he needs a way to beat him in order to achieve the next level. And I feel like it's going to be something similar to what he did with Kaiser against Ren. In fact, he will do it with Rin himself. Rin will have the best chances at dueling Hugo, and Isagi will have the best chances at analyzing Hugo. And I know the two best players against Hugo will leave Loki to wreak havoc. However, this is why I said the likes of Ryo, Karasu, and Aiko all need to up their game. But also we cannot forget about Baro and we cannot forget about Shido. And in fact, in the case of Hugo, we cannot even forget about Kunigami, which might actually be the way for Isagi to beat him. Isagi might utilize Kunigami in order to have a one-up against Hugo. And I know this way Isagi is not really beating Hugo himself, and he is utilizing his teammates. But we've seen that the writer has no issue with things like this. Isagi utilized Kaiser to win against Ren, and this did not mean that Isagi did not evolve. Isagi still acquired the fastest piece and still was able to pull off an amazing feat by reacting to Ness's future pass. And then there is another reason why I think Isagi needs to team up with Ren or Kunigami or Baro in order to defeat Hugo. And that's all because I feel like Hugo is the worst matchup for Isagi. Hugo is able to analyze Isagi's adaptability while completely dominating him in terms of dueling. both on and off the ball. And so I truly believe the only way Isagi could defeat him is to do the same as what Snuffy was doing. Snuffy, as we've seen, had no issue playing with the entirety of the team, and in fact he had to rely on Lorenzo's dueling ability a lot of times in order to advance Ubers, and so I think Isagi will do the same. Isagi will be insane off the ball, but he will rely on the likes of Rin, Kunigami or Baro in order to deal with Hugo, and then by dealing with him, he or them could score. And I feel like this encounter with Hugo will only push Isagi towards being closer to Snuffy. And as you all know, I feel like Snuffy with an insane adaptability will be Isagi in the future. However, as you notice, Hugo's presence alone, not only does it require Isagi to change and evolve, it also requires Blue Lock to evolve as well. I feel like Ryo and Karasu specifically will benefit a lot from facing Hugo. Karasu is already that smart and Ryo is already that powerful. And so I feel like both will work on the other weapons so they can bridge the gap a little bit closer to Hugo. Ryo will work on his analysis and his cognitive abilities more, while Karasu will need to train the physical aspect of his playing style a little bit more. That way, as I said, I think they get closer to Hugo. I don't think they will ever reach his level, but I think getting closer to him is enough. That way Japan will be ready to face the insane teams like Spain and France once more. Now going back to Isagi versus Hugo, let's actually analyze how Hugo completely swallowed Isagi. Well, first Ryo copied Kunigami's anchor playing style and gave the ball on a silver platter to Isagi, who went for the emptiest space and he was completely free to take his shot. Now before, when Isagi did this, it was Loki that stopped him. However, this time it was Hugo. And this could mean that unlike in the NEL, Loki will not play on defense, because as you all know, the NEL games were only 30 minutes and Loki played for only 3, so he was up and down because he has the stamina for it. However, for 90 minutes, I think it would be near impossible, especially with his speed and the amount of strain it puts on his body, and so I think that's why Hugo was the one to intervene here. In any case, as I said, Isagi snuck up to the emptiest space, but Hugo was right behind him. This immediately indicates if he is a talented learner, he definitely has metavision. However, if he is a genius, which I doubt it, and I will explain why in a second, then he has that insane perception that Noah, Lorenzo and Ren has. However, as I said, I am leaning towards him being a talented learner, and so he definitely has metavision. I mean, he could do what Karasu was doing with Kaiser in the PXG game before he unlocked his metavision. However, I doubt it. He was not on Isagi the entirety of the time. He actually snuck up on him and shocked him. But notice his tackle here. Doesn't it remind you of any other tackle? This is exactly what Kaiser and Ness were doing to Isagi in the NEL. And Isagi had no issue before pushing them with his hands and then shooting. However, why wasn't he able to do it against Hugo? Well, it's simple. The guy is mad beefy. The guy is literally thick and he is one of the best duelists because he is that thick. And this encounter was so one-sided that Isagi trapped. And here's the thing, he pushed him so much that Isagi is no longer facing the goal, and so he needed to trap in order to do his spinning volley. However, Hugo's dueling ability is so insane that he did not leave any space for Isagi. The latter could not even spin. And mind you, Hugo specifically knows this, and so he never came face to face with Isagi like Lorenzo did in the Ubers game. If you remember, Lorenzo showed up at the last moment as well, and he tried to stop Isagi from shooting. Hugo, being smarter obviously than Lorenzo, he actually tackled Isagi, not allowing him to do anything. I feel like Lorenzo also could pull it off with his dueling ability, but it takes an analytical brain in order to figure that out. Hugo doing it immediately is just a testament to his analytical brain. He analyzed how Isagi plays. He analyzed that if he shows up in front of Isagi, he would not have any way of figuring out with what leg Isagi is shooting. And so he did what Noah did to Prince in the Manshine City game and tackled him from behind using his insane physicality in order to completely halt Isagi. The latter could not even place his hand on Hugo and shoot like he did with Ness and Kaiser. This is an entirely different clash. The guy completely dominated him. And then, as I said, Isagi was forced to trap and try he used his spinning volley. However, Hugo also anticipated that. And this is something I actually spoke of in the Nigerian game. Unazi and Kuso had such a bad defending that they gave all the space that Isagi needed. They did not engage him whatsoever, and so the latter was able to spin and shoot the ball. Even Isagi himself had a better defending against Unazi. And I said the reason I prefer Rin's goal is that because Isagi's goal would have been stopped by an amazing defender clashing with him. And that's specifically what Hugo did. However, the massacre doesn't end here. When obviously Karasu and Rin came to help him because they are that insane, Hugo already anticipated this and he already instructed his teammates to cover Rin and Karasu, inevitably completely killing Isagi. And here's the thing, say what you will about these unfinished panels, but Hugo looking down on Isagi like this is just perfection with this art style. I wish Mr. Nomura starts using it. I know it's rough and it's not a complete panel, but it kinda made Hugo's dominance over Isagi that more special. In any case, another reason why I think Hugo's dueling is off the charts. Isagi then utilized his hands to give himself the space he needs before figuring out what to do. And we've seen him do this against Rin and we've seen him do this against Karasu and it worked. However, with Hugo, he already anticipated that, and the moment Isagi tried to pull it off, Hugo simply took the ball, leaving Isagi completely destroyed. He quite literally dominated him in every aspect, not just in being smart, not just in the physical aspect, but even in adaptability. However Isagi tried to adapt, Hugo was already adapting to Isagi's adaptability. And I gotta say this is going to be really hard for Isagi, specifically because he is freedom type player, and having an insane duelist like Hugo on you would be just the hardest thing Isagi ever faced. But this is exactly why Hugo told him that you are more suitable to be number 2. Well, this does not mean that Isagi should drop chasing being the best striker. No. This is not what Hugo meant. You see, in the Ubers game, and we need to go back to Lorenzo once more, because Hugo is as dominant in dueling as Lorenzo. The reason Isagi was the MVP of that game, the reason he was able to dominate the way he did, is specifically because Lorenzo was on Kaiser and not on him. Kaiser himself said that Lorenzo is limiting me while Isagi is having all the freedom that he wants. And here's the thing, the reason Lorenzo did that is because Kaiser was the most threatening player on the pitch and Isagi was the second. Are you guys understanding where Hugo is going with his statement? Well, if Isagi does the same thing as the Ubers game, if Isagi is right behind Rin the same way he was right behind Kaiser, Isagi would have much more freedom in doing whatever he likes from the shadows. That way he will be able to dominate far more than what he is doing right now, because teams will understand that they need to crush Rin in order to crush the team. There Isagi shines. However, this way, as Hugo said, if we crush you, we crush Blue Lock. Because right now the whole team is revolving around Isagi. Even someone who was as egotistical as Chigiri said that yeah, we still have Isagi, which to be honest was completely out of character, but I don't know, it is just to highlight that he is the #1 player in Blue Lock. However, if he leaves dictating the flow of the game for a genius like Rin, and then work from the shadows in order to counter anything that would happen to Rin, much like in the Ubers game, Isagi will have the most success. This is completely in line with what Kaiser did in the PXG game. By leaving Isagi as the front player and the whole team revolving around him, Kaiser was able to dominate from the shadows. And I feel like this might be the only way to defeat a team like France. Maybe against other teams, it is more suitable for Isagi to be in the leading role, but for teams like France, it could be Rin, it could be Baro, or it could be Shido. All these players are capable of leading Blue Lock against any other team while Isagi works from the shadows. However, what do you guys think about this theory? What do you guys think about my analysis of Hugo? Did I do him justice and I was on point, or did I miss few things with him and Isagi? However, that's all I've got for you today, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video because I had a blast making it, and until next time, thank you for watching.